Hey guys, Daniel here. This is another video. My next guest, they need no introduction. It's the legendary Grant Morrison. They are a comic book writer known for their work on various different comic books such as Batman, Superman, the Justice League, the new X-Men, Arkham Asylum, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Animal Man, Doom Patrol, 2000 AD, Final Crisis, Multiversity, about a million more. And they've also gotten to do some of their own books such as Proctor Valley Road, Klaus, Nameless, the Invisibles, Happy, the Filth, Joe the Barbarian, We Tree, and he is the creator of Bat Cow. Grant, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
No, I'm welcome. It's good to see you again, and I'm doing okay. But actually, I had my COVID booster yesterday, so I'm kind of feeling like really weird today.
That's why you might be a bit trippy in the middle of the interview. You're just like,
yeah. So if I go a bit COVID-y and if I start behaving like a virus, what's happening.
It won't be the weirdest thing that happens. I assume that just happens to every comic book creator. They all just start freaking out. But yeah, everyone watching, if you watch my channel, you know that Grant's one of my heroes. I've gotten to talk about quite a few of their comics. You may have seen one of my earliest videos from 3 years ago is me. The title of it, I Met Grant Morrison, in all caps. And I hate the video so much. Like, I'm a big speaker, but the description is like, I got to meet Grant Morrison. They are my hero. They are so nice. I got to meet them. They were very, and it's such a bad video, but that's one of my earliest videos. That's the first time I ever talked about comic on the channel. So now that I actually get to talk to Grant is amazing. And so just thank you again for coming on. But yes, for everyone that doesn't know, this is the second time I'm chatting to Grant. We got to meet like 3 years ago when he came to Dublin for a signing at Forbidden Planet. And it's one of my favorite memories. Like, I used, without like doubt, not to kiss his ass on air or anything, but he was just so kind. They were so kind. It was unreal. When I got to meet him, it was Forbidden Planet in town. I remember very vividly, I got to get off school early and I was going down and I was like, oh, I'm going to meet Grant Morrison. We're going to be best friends. And I was only till I was sitting there and I was reading outside Batman Rip. My dad got me a copy because I wanted to get signed by him. And I remember thinking, oh man, Grant's in there. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready to meet him. But he could not have been kinder to me. Like, he treated me like I was a friend, and I gave him some really horrible art I did of him. And he was just so kind. He acted like it was the best thing in the world. He had me sign it. But just, Grant, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Well, honestly, you might be super famous one day, and then I've got your artwork. I can sell it. That could be like, it's like having a drawing with John Lennon or something. Anything could happen.
I don't think I'll be famous in the art world, unfortunately, looking at that art drawing. But yeah, maybe I'll be a famous criminal. Then that means...
Then people will be interested in your sketches.
Yeah, absolutely. But without further ado, no one has come here to see me talk. Grant, I'm so excited to chat with you. So many different things to discuss. First, let me take you back a bit. So what was your first ever interaction with comic books? What was that first character that you remember saying, oh, I love that character? What was that first comic book memory that you can think of?
It was The Flash.
Oh, really?
And basically, my uncle Billy, who was a kind of big influence on me, he used to read comics, and he was a grown-up who read comics, and he had this amazing family of all my best pals, and he had tons of animals, rabbits and dogs and things. So he had a kind of really exciting house. So I used to go up there, and he had comic books. He was a big comic book fan. Yeah. His favourite was kind of Steve Ditko's Doctor Strange, but I wasn't into Marvel at all. The ones that I loved, they had a couple of Flash comics and Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. So those were the first ones I kind of picked up.
Oh, wow.
But Flash, I really got into it because it was that famous cover that I've talked about a lot, where it's the Flash is holding up his hand and saying, stop, you must buy this issue, my life depends on it. I just thought, this is great. The comic's talking to me, it actually wants to speak to me. So I loved the Flash. I loved the costume. I thought it looked great. I loved the notion of being able to have super speed. If I had a power, that's the one I would choose.
Oh, yeah.
So it was kind of him, and then I bought comics, but I used to read a lot of girls' comics, like British comics, because my dad was a soldier and then he became a pacifist, so they didn't really like us to read war comics. And as you know, like all the old British comics, they were still fighting the war like 25 years after it finished.
Yeah.
So I would get these comics, and it was just always some like guys shooting the Nazis, and my parents didn't like those, so I ended up reading a lot of girls' comics. And they were really cool because it was always like ghost stories and stories about girl detectives and science fiction. So they had a lot more going on in them.
Yeah.
And those were my early influences, the British girls comics and just a couple of these American things that I'd seen. But then I was 12 years old, and I went into hospital to have I think it was my appendix removed, it was at the time. And Billy's wife, who was my Auntie Ina, she brought me in a big stack of comic books, and that was the moment I became like a fanboy. That was like, this is my favorite. I love this stuff, you know. This is the moment. And from then on in, I was just like buying comics every month. I was obsessive, you know. I had a little plastic bag.
Yeah.
I'd go around every shop for miles around me, and my friends just looking for comics, you know, and buying everything. So
Yeah.
that was it. I mean, that family, Billy, my Uncle Billy, my Aunt Ina, they were the ones that really got me into it. And yeah, my own parents, my mum was a big science fiction fan, so she kind of encouraged the whole thing. So
Oh, wow,
I was
really?
lucky. And my dad encouraged me to draw. He would always bring paper back and pens and cool stuff. So I was really encouraged to be creative, which was great, you know. And the comics were accepted in my house. People, you know, they were everyone loved them.
And
But
yeah, so
Flash, he was my favorite hero. Basically, that's where I was going with that.
yeah, absolutely. And so do you think that if you got to read war comics, you'd kind of be a different writer now? If you just got to like, because you know, maybe you wouldn't choose to read girls comics if you got the chance to read war comics, or maybe you'd read both. But do you think that reading
Yeah,
also
well, no,
girls?
I would be Garth Ennis.
I was just about to say, you know.
I mean that's where Garth comes from. He loved all that stuff, but for me, I just hated it. It wasn't so much that I wanted to read them. It wasn't like they were forbidden to me. It was just I thought they were terrible. I
Yeah.
just couldn't. There wasn't anything. There was no one I could identify with in those comics. You know, it was just like soldiers shooting each other constantly, and not much else would happen. So I kind of like this space stuff and science fiction and the things that
Yeah.
were a bit weirder. And that's how I think I gravitated to superhero comics because they just gave me everything I needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you just touched on there. That's really interesting. Your father was a soldier turned pacifist. And of course, you grew up on this area. Do you think that superheroes maybe you liked them because they represented something greater? And because, of course, if you grow up in that environment, like saying no to war and stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe like, you know, bombs and stuff like that. Do you think that, you know, reading these superhero comics, which kind of gave you something greater to believe in, helped you in any way or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely, totally. You know, I mean, like I've said many times, like when I grew up, my mum and dad were anti-nuclear protesters, and it wasn't for them. They were older people. You know, they were in their 30s when they had me, and it's not like they were hippies or anything. They were just working class people who were horrified that we've got a nuclear base here. It's right over that window, 4 miles behind there. Is
Wow.
50 times the firepower to destroy the entire planet Earth. All the British nuclear subs go up and
No
down
way.
the lock out there. So I'm sitting right on top of this like powder keg. If that thing goes off in the next 5 minutes, you'll just see a white light, and then Scotland will go crazy.
Some connection issues, everyone. Grant just seems to have disappeared for a little bit.
It seems to have vanished, and there's a hole in the planet. But so the kind of thing was, I was always being brought on marches and taken on marches and anti. So, like I say, they were working class people who didn't like the notion that the British and American nuclear deterrent was sited right in
Yeah.
the west of Scotland, where people were quite poor and where they could easily lose us if anything went wrong. So my parents were part of a working movement of men and women who had children, and they were just horrified by the idea that they could go up in a puff of smoke any day. So they brought me out on all these marches and kind of protests and stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just terrifying because when you're a kid, you know, it's like if it's your parents are scared of something, then it's something serious, you know, and they were scared of the bomb.
Yeah.
And for me, the big breakthrough was to discover Superman, because I remember reading the comic, and Superman's like filming the atom bomb. You know, Superman's standing and he's taking an atom bomb in the face and just saying, "Hey, it tickles." It's kind of so suddenly, and like I said, I knew it wasn't real, but as an idea, he was real enough in my head, like, oh, there's something that can take on the bomb, and it's Superman. How cool is he? And the interesting, the irony of that is the same people who were bringing the bombs and the American soldiers who were, you know, living in the base here were the same people who were bringing in American comics. So they
Yeah.
kind of gave me the disease and the antidote. And
Here's a bomb, but here's Superman as well. So
yeah, and here's Superman who's way cooler than the bomb and can take on the bomb and laugh. So, like I say, although I knew it wasn't real, it was imaginatively it gave me something to fight with, you know, gave me something to fight back with. And I did love the superheroes because they didn't kill. They were the first American heroes because American heroes were like, you know, like gangsters or detectives or cowboys, and they were all killers. But in those comics I was reading at the time, superheroes didn't kill, and I kind of loved the idea that they would use their brains to solve problems. You know, as a little pacifist kid, They would use their brains to solve problems that other people would, you know, just bring out a gun and kill you. And that really resonated with me. It was kind of like, well, I want to have strategies like they do. You know,
Yeah.
use your imagination to not have to kill people if possible.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think that's what comics is. Like, it's just an idea that can help people and that inspire people. And I know, of course, you would know this. Like, and the fact that that helped you during that time, where of course maybe you would be scared of like all of this. Because I mean, if I grew up knowing that, you know, there was some bomb violence going on, where I probably wouldn't, you know, be the best. But the fact that, you know, an idea can kind of help you get through that and stuff like that. And I know your work has helped people. Like, we all know that page from All Star Superman, you know, where the
Yeah.
girl is about to commit suicide, and like Superman says, your doctor, you know, really did miss it, but you know, it's okay. And it was just, it's such a beautiful moment. And I know on Twitter, so it says, what's your favorite comic book page of all time? I've seen that come up the most. And so the fact that something like that, just an idea, can help people is really beautiful. I think that's
No, I think it's amazing, but it has to be real, you know. I think with that page in All Star Superman, it's becoming almost a cliche because it's so many people have put it up, and it's almost ripe for parody. But to me, that was for real. I thought, if I was Superman, what would I say? I wouldn't just say, you know, it's not like he's telling you that he's the strong one. He's saying, no, you're strong. You're way stronger than you think you are. So for me, that was quite real, and I think it's why it's worked. But interestingly enough, Daniel, I don't know, nobody's really ever noticed that story has a payoff in the same issue, and no one's noticed this, right? It's not just one page. If you go 4 pages later, Superman gets a message, because the whole thing he's doing is he's digging up a weird artifact that they found in a construction site, and the artifact is from the future. And Superman opens it up, and there's that globe, and there's this guy comes out, and he speaks in kind of text speak, and he says, "I am Rumik II, super scientist of the 24th century. You saved my great grandmother, and now I'm going to save you."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's karma. It's like, do a good thing, and it'll come back. It'll pay back. It'll like. So
that's crazy. That's fantastic.
No one's ever noticed that story has an ending, and it's like the guy comes back and he warns Superman that Solaris is coming, so Superman can then make this white super suit and take on Solaris because he knows, and that's
is
because
crazy.
He saved her, and this is her descendant from the future is coming back and saying, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't exist, so I'm going to save you too.
That's just fantastic. See, that's why I love it. That's like, your Superman is my Superman and your Batman is my Batman. So, I mean, it's just, that's perfect. And yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, Superman, your take on Superman is perfect. So just let me ask you a question. What does Superman mean to you as a concept? What is Superman? Is he just optimism to you? Is that what Superman is?
It's not even that, because Superman's not in this. Superman's been badly hurt. Superman lost everything. He's lost a planet. He's lost people. He works in a job where the boss yells at him and the girl doesn't fancy him. And, you know, this is basically original Superman. I'm not talking about how it's developed, but
yeah,
just the notion of this guy, unlike Batman, who's like, Batman's just like a billionaire and all the hot girls want to chase him in leather, you know, and everything. He's got the lot, but Superman's like us. He works in a job, and he goes in, he clocks in, he gets yelled at if he doesn't do his job right. So what I like about him is that he has those elements, but it's the fact that he's not real. What he is a symbol of the very best humans can be. And I think that's always the way. To me, that's how he should be played. It's why I don't like the kind of evil Superman stories or power corrupts, so superpower corrupts superly. You know?
Yeah.
I think no, he's not real. It's like he just always remember he's not real, but he's real as an idea. He's real inside our heads, and inside our heads, I think he represents just that. The best of us, the one that won't let you down, the one that will try the hardest, the one that even though he's grief-stricken, he won't show it. He's always just like, no, he's always emphasizing the best and the possibilities. And there's always a way. Nothing's impossible. And even when he himself is dying, he's still like that. So I think for me, that's what he represents. He represents something that's not real. You know, no one can be that good all the time. But inside us, we have that capacity, and so the more you think about Superman, the more you try to exercise that capacity, the closer you get to the ideal of Superman. So I just think he's only worthwhile as an ideal, as something we can aspire to, and not in a dumb way, just in a way that everyone can do better in their lives. Everyone can try harder. Everyone can be more compassionate or more kind, and that's Superman to me. He's not just super strength, not just supervision, it's super kindness, super heart, super compassion. It's all the good qualities we have. He is them 10 times.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see him. And it's really hard. I mean, when I was doing All Star Superman, thinking my way into that guy's head, just as an ordinary human, trying to think, how does he see things, and it's beautiful, and it's like, so I loved it. It was like a meditation. It was like thinking about Buddha or something, trying to get myself in Superman's head. But I think that's the only value of him. This is a guy who can't be corrupted. Imagine that we made up a concept that can't be corrupted. No matter how hard you try, it'll always reset to Superman.
Yeah, that's the perfect take. Like, it's the same thing for me growing up. I used to play Lego games with Batman and Superman, and I always play as Batman. And Superman was never necessarily my favorite, but it was just, I was glad that he existed. I was glad that he was there, because it was like, this is someone who, there's no vendetta to him. He doesn't really want anything. He just wants to be good. He wants to be kind. That's all he is. And like, it was weird. Batman's obviously inspired by the death of his parents to go do something. Kal-El is just kindness for the sake of kindness, just to show people that, it's okay. There's always someone that's going to help you. So it was weird. Like, I'd always just be glad that he existed. Like, and it was just a weird feeling there. So I think that's what's the magic of Superman, that he just means optimism to so many different people. I think that's just what makes Superman great.
I mean, a lot of people just see it, it's optimism, it's hope. But I think also, if you look at Superman and All-Star Superman, he's quite broken. He's been through a whole life, and there's been a lot of failures as well, but he never shows it. And I think that's why he always feels optimistic, even when he's hurt. He doesn't show it. He doesn't bring other people down, and that's his thing, So I think he does have depths of pain. I mean, he's not just a messianic, glowing figure who's like, everything's okay in his world. But even when things are not okay in his world, he's trying to make everything better for everyone else, because he thinks that's the most important thing a human being can do, or a person can do.
Yeah, absolutely. People always say, you can't write a good Superman story. He's too bland. You can't beat him. There's nothing to give him trouble. And I think that doesn't work, because, I mean, you've proved that like various different times. You can come up with all these different story concepts. But what are your thoughts on people that say, nah, you can't write a Superman story. You can't hurt him. So what's really the point?
I think that's just a kind of cliche, though, because we know that he can be hurt. He can be hurt emotionally, particularly, but he can also be hurt. It's like saying you can't do a good Thor story because he's too powerful, he's a god. Well, we know that's not true. It's just a kind of cliche that people have applied to Superman.
Yeah.
But it's not real. It's not like all superheroes. I mean, look at Thor, look, Captain Marvel, the Marvel Captain Marvel. You can't do a good story with her because she's so powerful she can defeat Thanos. Of course you can do a good story with that. Just put her up against something she can't defeat. So I don't think
like Batcow.
Yeah, like Batcow, no one can defeat Batcow. Let's face it. Batcow is the sheer power of absurdity. But yeah, so honestly, I think it's just a thing that gets applied to Superman that's not actually real. It could be applied to any superhero. How can you defeat Spider-Man? How could anyone fight that guy? It's it's impossible. So I think Superman just gets a bad rap because he was the first. And because a lot of people see him as a kind of symbol of patriotism or America, and he's not even that either. He's an immigrant figure who was taken in by the planet Earth. So I think there's a lot more to Superman. But yeah, he does get kind of, people like to say he's a Boy Scout, he's boring, there's nothing you can do with him. But there's as you know, there's a lot of stories to be told, and he's just us on a higher level.
Yeah, and it's like that beautiful moment in All-Star Superman where Lex Luthor sees what Superman sees, and he's like, just happiness, just kindness. And that was just such a great scene.
And literally, we're all connected, and this Superman sees this just by nature, just by the fact of his heightened senses. He realizes everything's connected, everyone's connected quite literally through time. And that's what, it just like fuses Luthor, it's just that's how I felt. That's what I was kind of trying to be, because I love Luthor in that story, because Luthor's like the worst part of me, and the worst part of all of us.
Yeah,
the petty, vindictive, the jealous one, and it's why they work so well together, because they finish each other off in ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like there's always that great dynamic between hero and villain. Like it happens in so many different. And that's the dynamic which you explore brilliantly in some of them. But one of your other Superman stories, which you got to do recently, was Superman at 30, which you got to come back to DC to do. All 4 issues are out now. Would I be correct in saying so?
Yep. Yeah.
So maybe there'll be a trade soon. But yeah, everyone should go pick that up. But yeah, how did you get roped back into doing Superman? Did they have blackmail on you, or how did that come about?
They didn't have that, but what they had was Dan DiDio, and Dan DiDio, who's the publisher at the time, he's not there anymore, obviously, but he was the guy that brought me back basically to DC in the early 2000s. And he came over to Scotland and he looked through all my notebooks and he just said, okay, we want to give you an exclusive contract. You can write your Superman story. You can do 7 Soldiers. So all of those things. So Dan always knew how to manipulate me. And I totally said I'll never do another monthly comic again after Batman. And I managed to do this for 7 years, and then Dan sat me down in Los Angeles and was going, would you like to do Green Lantern? I said, no, do not want to do anything, not interested. And he said, well, it was just saying, imagine you were interested, what would you do with it? And I started.
And this is what you did with it.
Yes, yeah. So I start pulling that out, and you notice that cover is based on William Holman Hunt's picture of Jesus, the light of the world.
Wow.
Check it out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's he's the light of the universe, light of the, you know.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that, but Dan basically talked me into it, and so I came out with all these ideas for Green Lantern. He said, well, do you want to write it? And I'm like, no. And I go home and I start making notes, and then I end up writing the book. So he did the same thing. He did the same thing with Superman: The Authority, and he said, we're going to do Superman. It's this 5G. It was this take on DC,
yeah.
which eventually didn't work out, but it was the idea that all the characters had aged in real time. So Superman was now 80 years old, and that's why he's got the grey hair and stuff. Like Batman's found a Lazarus pit or something, but a lot of them have grown old. And the idea was that Superman was now this super right-wing authoritarian, and he formed this team, the Authority, to take on. And I just said, I don't want to see Superman's not a right-wing authoritarian. That's not how you do it.
Yeah.
But I said, if you would let me do a verse of Superman where he's like a dad, where it's this kind of like he's having to lay down the law sometimes, but at the same time he's only doing it for the best reasons. You know, he's trying to be the dad. And I said, if you let me do that version of Superman, please don't make him a right-wing tyrant guy. You know, it's just not Superman. And so I got tricked into doing the book again, because if I didn't do it, they'd have made Superman a tyrant.
You were like, not on my watch, not my Superman.
No, so not at all. And I said, here's a way to do an older Superman who is a bit more like, he's a bit more outlaw, but without making him a bad guy, but showing that he's still got his sense of humor, he's still got his, you know, and even when he doesn't have his powers, he's still willing to fight the good fight. So yeah, I mean, I really liked that book. I didn't want to do it, but once I'd done it, I was really glad it was kind of the last thing I was doing with DC, because I don't have anything else in mind, and I think that one's a really good play out.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And so is this version of Superman like the same version of Superman as All-Star Superman? I know that obviously they're in different universes, but do you kind of write them the same, or do you feel no, two separate Supermans? Like they're both different kind of in that sense. What do you think?
I think they're all the same, but they can't all be the same. You know, as you know, the DC 1 million Superman is kind of like All-Star Superman goes in the sun. Then in DC 1 million, Superman comes out of the sun like 8,000 years in the future. So it kind of ties in. And the T-shirt Superman, yeah, exactly. The early years Superman is, I feel as if that's the same guy as the Authority. You know, the T-shirt guy, the sort of He was just a wild young kid. He's like a punk. He just doesn't care. It's like, yeah, shoot me, try. So I imagine that being, this is the old version of that. But at the same time, I don't know if they all fit together, but in my head, they kind of fit together.
Yeah, absolutely.
All-Star Superman's a different Superman from the Authority Superman, though. I mean, he's kind of like very much a Superman at the end of things. And All-Star Superman's just a kind of middle-aged dad guy. It's like, he's, you know, what do I do now? I don't have to be the voice anymore. So he was from a different period in his emotional life. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think I love how Superman and Authority. I thought I'd come in loving Superman, but one character I also loved was Manchester Black, who was just a fantastic character. I mean, like, he's probably going to die. I mean, no, he won't even die from in a fight. He'll just have alcohol poisoning and a croak on the spot. But he's just a fantastic character.
But people thought he was a bit John Constantine. I felt bad because I didn't want him to be like that. But what he actually is, if you read it in the voice of Johnny Rotten, John Lydon, that's who I wrote it as. So, like, John Constantine is Liverpool, kind of by way of Albert Square. But what Manchester Black is just, he's Irish, London Irish. So I wrote him completely as Johnny Rotten. And if you read it in Liddon's voice, you get the kind of whine, you know, that punky kind of, right, yeah.
Don't want it.
And that's him for me. But the actual original Manchester Black is way more like Billy Butcher from The Boys. I think he's much more a kind of military guy. Ours seems younger and a bit more, you know, and younger in the sense that, you know, he's younger than the original character, but he does seem like some kind of millennial caricature almost, you know. he's that guy who thinks he's really cool and edgy, he's the edge lord, you know. It's like, and he's always pulling everyone up for whatever he thinks, you know, for the crimes they've committed, but at the same time, he's just doing it because he's a bad guy. He's a psychopath. He just likes winding people up.
Yeah, that's why I love that dynamic there. Like Superman, who just books just good. He's just kind, he's just honest. And Manchester Black's like, I hate you so much. I hate you. I hate everything you stand for. And Superman never, you know, gives in. He never, you know, like says anything like, no, I hate you more. He just says, no, that's okay. But like, I could use your help here. Like, you could do something good. And that's just peak Superman.
And then because in the original story, you know, Manchester Black was leading that authority team, the elite.
Yeah.
But his whole thing was that he wanted a better world. I mean, he started out as this, I want a better world, but I'm willing to kick ass to get it. And Superman's saying, no, well, that's maybe not the best way to do it. So I went back to that notion of deep down, he wants a better world. And deep down, he's really, yeah, that's him.
Beautiful page.
Down, he's really happy that Superman is actually willing to give him a chance. He likes it, you know.
Yeah.
But in the original pitch, it was obvious that he was going to. Manchester Black's not there by chance, and he is a bad person. So there was going to be a conflict, and I don't know if that'll ever happen now. But in the original pitch, there would be a conflict, and it would be Manchester Black thinking, "Am I going to do this, or now do I think Superman's pretty cool, and I don't want to do this?"
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, and absolutely, everyone go pick up Superman and the Authority. Get it from your local comic book store. You can pick up 1, 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, it's fantastic book. Everyone make sure to go pick it up. And so you just brought it up there a minute ago, Green Lantern. I got to get this signed by you back in, 3 years ago when I met you at, and this was what you were promoting in the store. And yeah, it's a fantastic book. So this came about the same time. Did Dan Didio contact you to work on Green Lantern?
Yeah, that was it. He just he took me out for drinks and a dinner and said, what would you do with Green Lantern? I'm not doing anything with Green Lantern. What would you do? Well, here's what I would do. And then, okay, do you want to do it?
He dined and swined you. He was like, oh, come on, you know, I'll pay for the meals. Just come on, sit down. You know, it's just a bit cracking. And of course,
I mean, we were pretty good pals. And so he could always manipulate me into doing something. Most of the work I did for DC, I wouldn't have done it if he hadn't kind of pressed the buttons in my back.
Yeah, but absolutely. I'm like, I love like your Justice League run. You're slowly like I mean, now looking back at your DC work, you're like ticking off each member and giving them their own solo series. Like you did Wonder Woman, Batman, Green Lantern, but you've yet to do a Flash. And I know Flash, you just said is your favorite comic book character.
Yeah, it's weird. I know the only Flash I did was when me and Mark Miller did it in the 90s. We did a year.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And some of those were really good stories, but no, I've got a big Flash. I wrote a Flash movie with Ezra Miller as well, and then it got canned, and you know now there's a different Flash movie. But yeah,
you never get back cow in a film now.
No, somebody's got to do it. You know they will in the end. But the weird thing is, I thought I'd made up Batcow, but Batcow actually appeared in Tiny Titans.
No way.
Seriously, Batcow was already a character.
How can someone else create Batcow before you? What?
It's like, because it's an idea that was waiting to happen.
It was too perfect.
Batcow had to happen, so 2 of us come up with it. But I only come up with it because I had this idea for that sequence where it's Batman and Robin, they're jumping over the car and taking basically a burger right back through the process. I wanted to do this vegetarian kind of like, this is how it works. So they run through a slaughterhouse and it's taking you all the way back from the burger to the cow in every stage of it. And that's what I wanted. Then I wanted the final cow. It's like I wanted Damian to save it and just go, this is Batcow, he's my pal now. So that's where I came to it, because I had this big idea for a big bloody sequence set in a slaughterhouse. But yeah, Batcow also appears in Tiny Titans, so there's the alternate universe versions of Batcow as well.
Oh man, the multiverse of Batcow film coming cinema near you soon. I remember during online school, I just posted a picture of Batcow onto Twitter with some caption. And my dad said, you know, stop posting pictures of Batcow. Go and do your work. I was like, okay. So I don't know why. I remember very vividly, like just during school, I just remembered Batcow and I just posted a picture of him. And it's so weird, but I love Backhouse so much. That's the only reason I wanted to do this. I mean, I don't really care about the rest of your work. You did Backhouse though, which I am very,
I
very
agree. I mean, who cares? I mean, if Batcow persists, that's the important thing. That's why I'm
yeah.
here.
That's your legacy. You know, there'll
That's
be a
it.
big statue in a couple million years of Backhouse.
Yeah, and they'll say like Bob Kane created Batman, and then I created Batcow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do honestly love Backhouse. He's a brilliant character. Best character you've ever created, probably. I mean, yeah, Damian Wayne as well, but you know, Backhouse there.
Story, look, Dan DiDio wrote that Batcow story, which is actually is great. It's like the Batcow actually has its own 8-page story.
It's what a world we live in.
She gives milk to a child who's in trouble and stops a bank robbery, and it's like by just standing there, it's brilliant. She just stands there, and everything goes wrong for the bad guys.
It's perfect. What a story. And like we just touched on earlier, like stories can inspire people, but they can also make people laugh. Like because you came up with a concept and you put it in a comic about how I'm sitting here, how many years later, bringing it up and talking about it and talking about how much I love it. And that's just the magic of comics, like, you know, and it's just that like one thing that maybe you didn't expect for people to love. And what am I saying? Of course, you knew everyone would love that Backhouse immediately the second you penned him. But now, like, we sit here and like I'm still talking about it, which is just it's fantastic. So I think that's one of the
my favorite bit with him is because it can be funny, but it can be really poignant and tragic as well. And there's the bit where Batman is Damian's dead. It's the end of Batman Incorporated, and Damian's just died.
yeah.
And Batman's in the thing, and he presses a button that says "Agent erased" kind of thing, and Damian's face disappears, and Batman just turns around and looks at the cow, and he says "Bat cow," and it's in inverted commas, like Damian called you back. This is insane. And the cow just goes moo. But then Batman screams out his rage and his pain, and all the bats go crazy. And that, to me, it's like it's funny, but it's tragic. It's like that's Batcow, you know.
Yeah, see, that's the beauty of comics, and I'm so excited to get into your Batman. But let's just finish up on here at Green Lantern. So this came on. Did you come up with a new take for Hal when you came onto the book? Like, because honestly, did it just start with you working on your notebook and saying, "Here's what I do, here's what I do," and then Hal came out with that, your version of Hal?
Yeah, I just thought, well, I'd read the early stuff, the John Broome stuff. You know, I wasn't a big Green Lantern fan. I didn't like him. He was always getting beat up by guys. You know, he was always fighting homeless people on railway tracks, weirdly enough. And I just, he seemed to kind of, he wasn't my guy. Exactly. And that's why I put that story in there, that sequence.
Yeah.
But I thought nobody, he'd been done as a cop or a warrior, but I thought nobody'd got to the kind of beatnik nature of him, that he's a guy who just, he's grown bored with Earth. He's seen a bigger world. He can do anything, and he comes back to Earth, and he still loves it, and he still has friends here, but it's like going back to the tiny little village. And you've seen the big world now, you've seen the big city. But I also thought of him like kind of Jack Kerouac thing on the road, where he's just thumbing a lift. This guy can fly through space. He's got no possessions. He's just got a bag with his jacket and his lantern, and he thumbs rides like old school, you know, in America, like nobody would do nowadays, because you'd be surely picked up as a serial killer. But he does that. And I thought, well, it's the kind of Zen Buddhist version of it, you know. So that gave me the take on it. And because John Broome, the writer, he himself was pretty, he was kind of beatnik, Zen. He used to travel the world, you know. He was really interesting guy. So I thought, that's my Hal Jordan. He's not a cop. He's not an authoritarian. He's not a warrior. He's not a soldier. Just this weird individual who's, you know, with this incredible willpower, and he's been selected to do this job, and it suits him because he just likes the bum. He doesn't want to be anywhere. Doesn't want to settle with anyone. He wishes he could. He'd love the idea. You know, he's got a family. So that was the key, the wanderer, the kind of, you know, the beatnik, and from that, then I thought, well, maybe the Guardians should be less like old authoritarian policemen and more like it's the Dharma, you know, it's the law of the universe. There's gravity. Well, that's just a law. That's just, we have to deal with that. Electromagnetic, we have to deal with those things. Those are laws. And that's what he is the policeman of, you know, and part of that is dealing with evil where it manifests itself. So we just come up with the idea of him as kind of the character he's always been, because he had a job as a toy salesman, he had a job as a truck driver, he had a job as an aircraft pilot. Every one of them is completely different. So who's the guy that does that? It's a guy that's just, he doesn't care anymore. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't care. I'll pump gas if you want, because tomorrow I'm going out to the Crab Nebula to solve some problems, you know. And that kind of was the key into that character, and then it became like, okay, so what do we put him up against? How do you know? And it's someone, I love the idea of just doing a superhero who's really good at his job. And most comics is like, let's give him problems, let's give them like, no, I just thought this guy's really good. The minute he walks in, you know the problem's going to get solved, and it might be in some mad way, but I just wanted that one guy who's like, this is it. The sheriff just came in, he's going to work it out. There's nothing will stand in his way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love like about your run. Like you just touched on there, like it's a balancing act. Like there's also a lot of like him, like Hal actually as a person enjoying his life with different people and seeing that maybe there is more to him than just being an intergalactic space cop. And that's something that I know you're very like, you know, applauded for you running Animal Man. Like so much of Buddy's out of costume and he's talking to his family and his family play a huge factor. And it's like just that balance, like it's not just about the action, it's about these characters that, you know, you have to end up kind of liking. And the best way to do it is to show them as people, like they are people, whether they put on the costume, whether they take them off. Like at the end of the day, they're just people trying to do what they believe is right.
They're not always, I mean, I think what's important and what you're making me think of is they're not always people like us. They're people who are kind of better than us, and that's what I love about them. It's like,
yeah,
think yourself into, here's the guy that will run into the burning building. I don't know if I'd do that. But, you know, to put yourself in the place of the person who would, then it maybe teaches you how to be more like that. So that's what I like about it. Like I say, like doing Hal Jordan, not as a human like us, but as a human who gets stuff done. I'm not like that. I barely tidy the house. But Hal Jordan gets stuff done, and there are people like that. So to write about someone who's not like me, I think is interesting. To find a humanity that's different from mine. It's not necessarily about weakness, but it's about strength. There's a lot of making superheroes human is about making them weaker. But I don't think that's necessarily how you make them more human. You make them more human by like, who is this guy? Who is this guy that does this job? You know, and thinking about who that person would be and what kind of mind it would take to do that as a human being, you know. And then I think you get yourself into interesting areas to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. You put it perfectly there. That's why I really like your work and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's also important for you to explore them as people, not just as like not have them defined by what they do as a superhero.
No, I get kind of bored. I always have to remember that they've got superpowers and that they do this, because most of my things I'm trying to make it, how do they solve the problem without superpowers, even though the superpowers become maybe a metaphor for a way of thinking or a way of dealing with the subject. But yeah, I always forget about the powers. I always find myself writing characters thinking this guy can blow out the sun. Just don't forget that. So no, that's all. It's about how they solve problems in their heads more than how they solve problems with the powers. The powers then become an extension of their invention, their cleverness.
Yeah, absolutely. See, that's why I love, like I could just talk to you about like just writing in general all day. You're like you have a great understanding, I think, everything. Just about comic book characters and about what works and what doesn't. So I think that's fantastic. But yeah, everyone go pick up Green Lantern. 2 trades. There's 12 issues. So is there 2 trades?
4.
4 trades. Oh, so
there's 2 seasons. The second season, like, I really get talked into it, and I didn't want to do it, and so it's really experimental and weird. But it's my favorite one.
Your weird work is often my favorite of your works. Like you've done so many great weird stuff, which I'll be getting into soon. But now allow me to touch on Batman. I just had to talk about this. I have Batman Rip right here. This is the comic. I had this on my bookshelf for the last 3 years. I read it a lot, and now I'm sitting here talking to Grant about it. It's just awesome. But this, you can see Grant's on there, and he did a little bat logo. And I remember on the bus home, I was looking at it, I was thinking, man, a bat logo from, like a Batman writer. It was just a little thing, but I remember sitting there thinking, oh, so awesome. And so I've had it up in my room for a while, so I finally got to bring it down just for the purpose of this. But yeah, Batman. So how did Batman even come about? How was that whole thing? How did that come to you?
They just asked me back in 2006. They said, do you want to do Batman? And I hadn't really done that. I'd done Arkham Asylum. That's what made my money. That's how I get out of poverty,
That's why you're loaded right now, I'm sure,
Well, no, I mean, I'm loaded now thanks to my wife being able to manipulate money in a way that I could never imagine. But back in the day, Batman was the first thing I did that really made me money enough. I could move out a rented house and buy a house and stuff. So I'd kind of done I'd done Batman Gothic, I'd done Batman in Justice League.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure. I didn't have much an idea. And they said, "Do you want to do Batman?" So I said, "Look, if I'm going to do Batman, I want to do all the stuff that no one has done." Because everyone was still following Frank Miller and Dark Knight. It was so brilliant that it left such a mark that everyone wanted to do that. But I
Yeah.
went back to the weird 50s stuff, that bizarre, like where he was fighting aliens
Yes.
and the mad kind of angular, like, yeah. Well, that was yeah.
There's a
That was my
collection of
first.
2 stories there.
Oh
Arkham
wow,
Asylum.
that was my first goal. But yeah, so this one was more like Batman is, this figure is so powerful that he can even survive a whole decade of terrible stories where he's going to space and fighting bat apes and turning into a baby Batman. And I thought, oh, no one's gone near this stuff. So is there something I could do with that? And out of that then came the idea of, what if I treat Batman's entire publishing history as one guy's life? So those early stories from 1938, he's like 19 years old. He's just back from traveling the world. He's like, he's just the smartest guy. But he goes out, and I had him a bit younger. I thought he goes out and he's really young because he's so desperate to get into a fight and avenge his parents. So I thought the early Batman where he's really skinny was the first Bob Kane stories, and he's skinny and he's got the weird horns. I thought that's
Yeah.
him. He's just going out like, and he's mad, he's insane, but then he meets this little kid whose his parents had died, little Dick Grayson, but Dick Grayson's too young, so Dick Grayson processes it differently, and he's just like, I'll go out in my cape, I want to take on the world. And I love the idea that this little goth teenage Batman, he's now 21 and he meets Robin, and suddenly it's like he's got a little brother, and suddenly he's got responsibility. And so that explained those stories, Batman's suddenly a bit more of a paternal figure, and Robin's just this crazy little working class kid who comes into the rich boy's life. And it's like, oh, I wish I was like you. So I'm thinking like this is that, and the dynamic then forms, and suddenly they've got a Batcave because Robin's going, oh, we should get the big penny and let's put stuff and let's get a dinosaur. And so Batman becomes that figure, and through the 50s and so on. And I imagined them just getting into, the villains start to appear, and the villains are like Scarecrow gas and Joker venom and all this stuff, so they're tripping for most of the time. And a lot of those weird 50s space sci-fi stories can be explained by them being in an altered state. And then getting into the 60s and 70s where Robin leaves, it's the idea that he grows up and he leaves to go to college. And then Batman becomes this playboy figure in the 70s, and he's an international traveler, and it's Talia and Ra's al Ghul. And suddenly Batman's more like James Bond. And I thought, well, that's him when the kid leaves, that's he's going back to his kind of. And it all worked, and I thought, this is like one person's story. And as it went on, he gets a new Robin, then that Robin dies, and Batman gets darker and more paranoid and more messed up. And it totally mapped onto all the decades of Batman, down to the, so I thought, this is the story of one guy, and he has this insane mission, and every single thing we've ever read is a story from that, and that's his life, and he's gone through it all, and he's gone through the Batman TV show as well. There's been a moment where the criminals are just all pop criminals, and it's just kind of mad. It's like art.
Yeah.
But that's not what he got into it for. But Robin loves that stuff, Robin loves having a laughing contest with the Joker. So it was that, and it worked really well. It was just like, I can tell the entire story of Batman as the story of this one person. That's what I'm going to do. It's like, how can someone then turn that history and all those experiences against him as a weapon? And that was the notion. It's like, here's all the things you've forgotten about. Here's Zur-En-Arrh. Here's the weird purple costume from the 50s. Here's
Batmite.
Everything. Yeah, Batmite. Everything you've forgotten about and denied, everything you put in a pot and slammed the lid down, we're bringing it all back and having Batman deal with it as a contemporary Batman, as a modern kind of like, how does Christopher Nolan's Batman deal with Batmite was the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's such a perfect take. Like, this is probably like one of the first Batman stories I've ever read, and it's absolutely my favorite, Batman R.I.P. But yeah, so coming on, how did the decision come to introduce Damian Wayne, who is one of my favorite Robins, and you're the, of course, co-creator of Damian Wayne. You came up with the concept. But how did that come about? What made you say, okay, what if I give Batman a son? What was it about that kind of appealed to you?
Well, there was an old story where Batman has a baby, and it nothing to do with this. There was a bunch of sort of Son of Batman stories, even going back to, again, to the 50s stuff. There was a lot of like tales of what Batman got old and had a son. But then I thought, no, there's that whole story with Talia when he's in the desert, the Neil Adams stuff, again, with the sexy, airy-chested Batman, you know, he's
Yes.
Bond Batman, basically, and so he's clearly, there's this big romantic moment with Talia, and I thought, well, what if it was real? What if it actually did introduce a son? But I was only going to do that. That would have been a 4-issue story, and then the kid dies at the end, because I thought it's too much of a thing to bring into the Batman mythos, is to give him a son. That's too much. It's like it's asking too much of other writers. They might not want to deal with it. So I was going to kill him off in 4 issues and just make it a little tight story about Batman had a son, then he died. Oh, tragedy, you know?
Yeah.
The character was just too cool, and I just got like, I wanted to write more, and people hated him, and I thought, well,
really,
I love the idea that I've got a character that people hate because I'm going to make you love him, and that'll be
yes,
you know, and that's what we did. And the way to make people love him was to pair him with Dick Grayson as Batman, and Dick Grayson could be this upbeat. He's the young Robin grown up, and then he's like, I'm nothing like that miserable old guy, you know, and he was really great. And because Dick Grayson had been with lots of superheroes in the Teen Titans, he's like, oh, he knows Superman, he's dealt with people like Damian before, so he was able to then bring Damian out of his shell kind of and bring him towards heroism. And the story, that the arc became much longer, but basically that, I mean, I do think they should have killed him, but he's been so popular that they just had to bring him back.
Exactly, And so the decision to kill Damian Wayne, we just talked about his creation. Now let's talk about his death. You know, what made you say, okay, I think it's time for Damian to, and it was a huge shock to me, because I recently read Incorporated in school, because of course, where else would you read it? Because they were doing these little collections, which also had Snyder stories, your stories, and I think like some other stories, but it was like, and so anyway, I'd also read Incorporated on the back, like on the backups, and then like I saw the death of Damian Wayne, I was like, oh, what? I assumed you'd bring him back next issue, but that was kind of like the death of Damian Wayne. So how did you come up with that concept?
Well, that was, like I say, that was the original idea. I wanted him, he was going to die in 4 issues, but then I got so into the character, I kept him going. But I wanted to leave all the toys in the box when I left, you know, and I thought Damian was just such a big deal, like the son of Batman. It's like too much. So I kind of wanted to just take him out so that no one had to deal with it. But as I say, he became so popular that other people did want to deal with him and write about him, and so they resurrected them pretty quickly. But to me, it was just always going to be a tragedy. It's like being the son of Batman, you're doomed. You're doomed. The son of Batman and Talia, you're doomed. And to make that, and for Batman to have a secondary loss, you know, not just his parents, but his son is gone because of the mission. And I thought it would have brought him back to where I picked him up, you know, as this quite driven, dark figure.
Yeah, and now, yeah, that's absolutely perfect. I think I love Damian Wayne as a character. I think he's so great, and I'm looking forward to when we get his live action debut or something like that, because it's only a matter of time. Like, I'm absolutely certain we will get Damian Wayne in the film. Of course.
Well, he is a good character. He's kind of, because he's trained, you know, it's a Robin who doesn't have to be trained. He's been trained since birth to destroy Batman and replace him, which is such a just that. I don't know why no one else thought of it, but it's it is a good one. It's not like I get anything though. It's like I don't get anything from him.
Creating no, from Backhow, of course, that's where you're making the most cash. I assume you're a millionaire.
Backhow brings in the billions, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But now
very popular in another dimension.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But now, everyone, allow me to show you the best Batman page of all time. This is when Batman got buried alive, and he crawls his way out. And that's why I love your Batman as I look at your Batman as an unstoppable force. That's what I think your Batman is. I think, you know, like, it's more, not really, like, he's not a human. I don't look at your Batman as a human. I look at him as a force. Like, he's just not going to stop. Like, you can shoot him and then come back, because that's what Batman does. That's what Batman is to me.
Well, he's been replaced by a drive that's unstoppable. It's been, you know, and I actually had to research that and figure out how much can you push, how much soil can you push, and then I made Batman push like double, you know.
Yeah,
but it's all actually pretty accurately worked out as to how you have to have a pretty shallow grave, though. It's impossible to escape from a 6 feet deep grave.
Unless you're Batman or Backhow, of course.
Well,
Oh,
unless you, what was her name? The bride from Kill Bill. She gets out of London.
oh yeah, absolutely. If we're looking to Quentin Tarantino films for logic, I think we'll be here a while. But yeah,
We're lost. We're lost. But
absolutely.
no,
And like,
that was the absolute. It had to be Batman Returns from the grave. It's like nothing will stop him, you know.
yeah,
And
but that's just a fantastic page. It's like, bench pressing a pine coffin lid through 600 pounds of loose soil that's filling my mouth, crushing my lungs, flat and shredding my dehydrated muscles. And yet Batman still does it because he can't be stopped, you know. And that's why I think your version of Batman is it's just so good. And you complement that character perfectly. But so as you were doing your run on Batman, was Final Crisis happening at the same time?
yeah, pretty much. And
Oh,
that's why
wow.
it all tied in together. You know, everything links together. You have to read them all. I mean, you can actually read a page from Batman and then cross to Final Crisis and then come back to Batman. So I mean, I was doing it deliberately to annoy people to sit with like 4 comics, and I wanted this kind of 4-dimensional thing where you're sitting with 4 books and having to read that page and that page and that page. So I was being a little bit difficult with that one, but yeah, but it all ties in, it all fits together.
Yeah, fantastic. And Final Crisis, which is a fantastic story, that ends with Batman, and he squares off with Darkseid. And it's probably one of my favorite comic book moments of all time. He has a gun, and Darkseid says, maybe you could fire the gun, but my Omega beams are quicker. And Batman's like, try me. And then it was that's Batman. And then they both shoot it, and Batman crisps him clean in the chest, and he gets sent back through time, which is a
Yeah.
fantastic arc because it made one of my favorite Batman arcs of all time. Dick Grayson as Batman, Damian Wayne as Robin, and then going there. I love that just so much.
Man, honestly, Daniel, I loved that. I would have written that for 5 years, and they just wouldn't let me do it. They said, "You got to bring back Bruce Wayne." I said, "No, this is the new generation Batman and Robin. People are going to love this."
Yeah.
But I ended up. I was only allowed to do 16 issues, and even that was a push. And I could have done 5 years and just made everyone think Bruce was dead and gone. You know?
Yeah, I think that would have been fantastic because it's time for a change. And I just loved the dynamic. I was kind of thinking Robin and Robin, like talking to like just two kind of light-hearted people. But instead, you kind of swap that around. Like Dick Grayson was going, like, come on, have a bit of crack. And, David was like, no, everyone will die, and stuff like that. And I think that's why I love that dynamic so much. Was it fun for you to just play with that dynamic between those two characters?
No, that was the best bit of it. And the fact that if you look at it, the way that basically Dick Grayson is coaching Damien, but he does it in such a way that Damien doesn't even know it's happening. And
Yeah, absolutely.
he's so cool about it. He just guides the kid in a way that Damien doesn't even know he's been totally guided and controlled by this brilliant mind who's again like I love that Dick Grayson is just happy. Just nothing depresses him. His parents died and he fought back. He's been a superhero since he was 10 years old, and that guy, who was in the Teen Titans, who knows everyone, who's Superman's pal, who's Jimmy Olsen's pal. It's that guy. Damien didn't stand a chance against that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love that dynamic there. I thought it was just so good between those two characters, and that's what I love. And then you also got to introduce one of my favorite Batman villains, but also the one that terrifies me the most, Pig, who I used to call Pig. It was during that thing. Was that when you
No,
introduced?
he's just Professor Pig. He's based on a song by Momus, who's my favorite singer-songwriter. And a lot of my stuff, I listen to Momus a lot, so a lot of my work has been influenced by him over the last 20 years. But Pig was it was a song about Pygmalion, about My Fair Lady, and the notion of you're trying to control some girl and tell her what to do, and she rebels. So I just did this. The song is called Professor Pig, and I just thought that'd be a great Batman villain. I'll tie it into My Fair Lady and Rex Harrison and trying to make this perfect person out of any human being you can get your hands on. And it turned into, and I thought, and Batman villains are supposed to be crazy. I want to do one who really seems crazy.
Yeah, and
But it's all worked out. It's like everything he says seems demented and non sequitur, but everything is part of this huge scheme that he's got about the rat trap and the experiments of Harry Harlow and all these things. It's really well worked out. It's like what happened to him and why he thinks like that, but it reads like gibberish.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you're well aware he was using the Batman Arkham games, Batman Arkham Knight, in the final
Yeah,
one.
no, that was the best bit. Going down into that parlor That was like one of the greatest bits of that game. That was so
I
amazing.
love Batman Arkham Knight with a passion. I play it like every couple of months. It's my favorite game of all time. And when I used to talk about it with my friend, and I'd literally like we'd pretend we were Batman characters on the yard. Like I'd be Pig. This is back 2015, which is a while ago. But playing against Pig was so terrifying. He's such a great villain, but it's like, you know, like, and he has like he thinks what he's doing is right. And that's what's I think what makes a villain good.
He thinks he's making perfection out of imperfection. And then how can you explain, no, man, you're not? No, I am.
And that's why I think he's just such a perfect like villain, because he's just like, you can't explain anything to him, like, and he's just like, so like when you hear his voice you get the shivers, you just don't like him. And that's why I think he was such a great villain. But yeah, who is your favorite Batman villain, just out of curiosity?
Oh man, I don't know. I think it's honestly it's so obvious, but it's the
Joker has to be.
Joker's the most fun. And every time I've written the Joker, I've thought I'm going to do a new personality for him. So I've done it. I did it Arkham Asylum. I did it in yes, but also in Aztec that Mark Miller and I wrote. In Aztec, we did the Cosmic Joker, and then so every time I've written him, he has to come back. He's different each time. So in Batman, there's the first time you meet him, it's the Thin White Duke of Death. It's this David Bowie evil Batman, and then he becomes Oberon Sexton, who's almost a good guy.
Yeah.
And so my thing with the Joker is every time I write him, he has to be completely different. It's a new personality he's taking over, but he's still the Joker. He's still going to do bad stuff. He's still going to get caught up in his schemes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you just gave me the perfect segue. Arkham Asylum, we'll touch on this for a little bit. So this was like your first story that was really successful, was it? Because like, I mean, I know at the time, was this, I don't know how it was at the time, but was this really like big at the time?
Yeah, it was massive, but it was weird. Like comic people didn't like it. It was really hated. But in the outside world, it was gigantic. No, it sold 120,000 copies on the first day, and Dave McKean and I got a dollar copy. So I was like a poor kid. And then on the day, I remember Karen Berger called me up, and I had a phone in the rented flat, and everyone used this Communal phone. So I run out to the Communal phone. Karen Berger's on the phone. She says, Arkham Asylum sold 120,000 copies. You're rich.
Wow, what a way.
So yeah, so for me it was a real big deal. Honestly, it was a big breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fantastic book, and I think that this is like one of the perfect like Batman books, because you know, like there's just all the villains included, and it's such a great like look into Batman. But you said one of the ways that this can be interpreted is as like Batman's ultimate dream. Would it be correct?
Yeah, think about it as Batman. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's like Batman. Like Bruce goes to bed at like 6 a.m, and this is what goes through his head every night. It's just this endless like trying to solve the problem. And I think what people didn't get about it, yeah, I mean, like comic fans were like, oh, why is it not like Batman the Cult? Why is it not like Killing Joke? But we wanted to do something that was really European, like cinema, like European cinema, like surrealist cinema, and something that was really different from those books. And yeah, I mean, Dave McKean was just like, he was going in completely new places with that. And even for him, it was like he wasn't going far enough. So I kind of, when it came out, it had a really quite bad reception from comics. And I've always been a bit defensive about Arkham Asylum, but I really love it.
I love it as well. I think it's brilliant. Like, I love how you can write something like Batman Rip, which is like this story, conclusive story that, but then something that's abstract as this, which I love so much. Like, I remember reading it and thinking, this is just fantastic. Like I was so excited to just click to the next page, and there's this really horrifying feel to it as well. And I also love, sorry, there you go.
I remember we had that program. There was a Dave McKean and I were on a television show, a British television show called Pebble Mill at 1, which was a kind of news thing, like a gay burn kind of thing, and we had that page on, and they said, "Oh, he looks a bit creepy." No shit, sister,
Do you reckon? Do you? Oh, that's good.
It was immensely successful. It sold a lot, but comic people didn't like it. The response from the comic community was quite bad, which really hurt me at the time. I must admit.
I think it, like, looking back now, it's one of my favorite Batman stories, that and Batman Rip. I think it's just brilliant. But I also love how you explored my favorite Batman villain of all time, Two-Face, in this. Like, the flip of the coin. He says, all right, listen, I forget what it is. I think it's like heads you leave, tails you die. And he lies. And
that's what I loved. He just broke his own rule. no, I can do
That's
this.
yeah, that's why I loved it. I sat at the end and I couldn't get that out of my head for days after reading. I was thinking, oh, I have to talk about that. I just love it so much because Two-Face is my favorite villain, and like we see that he's kind of slowly progressing. I love that aspect of Harvey Dent or Two-Face, and it's kind of like he's battling. There's an internal battle in his head for what he wants to do. Like there's a part of him that like I think Harvey Dent does not want to be Two-Face. He even though he does hate Batman, Harvey Dent, he doesn't want to do this.
Right, you're totally right, Daniel, and that's Harvey at the end, just saying, no, he's just lying. It's Harvey. That's Harvey has won. Harvey's come through, you know.
Yeah, see, that's why that's his that's why it's such a beautiful book, I reckon. And then of course everyone's favorite Killer Croc is also in a few pages, and then also characters like Mad Hatter. But this is a fantastic book. So after doing this, you know, I mean, I assume you went on a trip to Kathmandu. Am I pronouncing that right?
No, I went round the whole world. Honestly, I did an entire trip round the world and went to lots of places. Kathmandu came a couple of years later.
Oh, did you come to Ireland? Or I'd say you must have skipped Ireland. I don't blame you. I would skip Ireland.
No, I've been in Ireland a million times. I used to hang out. I used to spend a lot of time in Dublin. And my family, I'm like second generation Irish. You know, both my grandparents are Irish. So yeah,
That's amazing.
No, totally. That's my background. So no, I'd spent a lot of time in Ireland. I love Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if you ever do, once you do come back to Ireland, inevitably we'll have to meet up and I'll have you sign my new stack of comics, and then we can do an in-person interview, or I'll just track you down to Scotland and break into your house. Either way works for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kathmandu. So how did that come about? For anyone, this is such a fantastic story, such an amazing experience. I really want to hear about this. But so, how did this whole thing about Kathmandu come about? Can you tell us that story? Would you mind?
No, simple. I had some money in the bank, right, and I used to. But back in the time, I'd gone kind of mad, you know, in the 90s. I'd made a lot of money, and suddenly I could do anything I wanted to do. And I thought, well, I'll be a crazy writer and travel the world and soak up experience and take drugs and psychedelics and things that I've never done before, you know. So I kind of put myself through this kind of experience. But my friend and I had seen the guy that played my guitar in my band, and we watched this documentary by Dan Cruikshank, who's an art historian, and he was following in the footsteps of Buddha. So he starts in India and he works his way through to Nepal, and he's in Kathmandu, and there's a bunch of stairs that lead to a temple. The temple is called Swayambhunath, which is the self-created one. And there's 365 stairs. And he basically says, so the legend goes that if you can climb these 365 stairs on one breath of air, you will achieve enlightenment in this lifetime. So me and my friend Ulrich, we look at each other and go, right, we're doing this. Guaranteed. So we honestly, we bought a plane ticket, two of us, and went to Kathmandu like the next week.
Yeah.
And we ran up the stairs. We did it. It was easy. It was super easy. But 2 days later, we're sitting on top of the hotel, and he'd gone down. He was feeling sick, so he was lying in the room, and I was sitting on the roof garden in the hotel. And I just started to have these insane, like it was more than anything I've ever experienced before, like hallucinations.
Yeah.
And I ran back down into the room, and then I lay down and bang, the whole thing happened. These silver things came through the walls, like mercury, like, you know, like anti-gravity, like mercury came through the wall. And it's like, you asked for this, you came here and you asked for this, and now you're going to get it. So they said, where do you want to go? And I said, Alpha Centauri was the first thing. I don't know why. No, but then it was like this, everything disappears, and I'm like, Stargate, tunnel, boom. Then I'm in space, like, and my body's gone. All I've got is consciousness. I'm like, what just happened? I'm in space, and there's 3 suns up ahead, and there's this planet that's a kind of weird greeny violet. And they said, well, this is it. Alpha Centauri, you asked, you want to go to Alpha Centauri, here it is. And so I went down into this thing. No, I mean, it's mad, you know. It's just. Yeah. But I used it in All-Star Superman, where it was these creatures that were made of neon tubes, like, and I realised they were tungsten gas intelligences that they had grown exoskeletons of glass around them.
Yeah.
And they were communicating in this bizarre language, and the voices that I was hearing just said, look, we got to get out of here. You've really embarrassed these people. Let's get out of here.
Amazing.
hey, here's the deal. This is what you wanted. We're going to turn you around. Just be ready for this. We're going to turn you and show you the universe is how it looks from outside. And I got rotated through the fifth dimension, or so it felt.
Yeah.
And I looked down, and it was the entirety of space and time. And it was like this ball of like, I said it was like a ball of sphincters. It was like collapsing whole, just millions of them just like constantly folding into one another. And I could see, they would show me like down there is like, there's Shakespeare, and right next to him is World War II, and right next to that is like, but they don't know, they don't see each other because time is like folded in this particularly convoluted way where they don't even know there's a dinosaur walking by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, and then they said, right, and now look around, and I looked, and I was in this space, like this gigantic vaulted blue space, like endless forever, but at the same time it was endless. It felt as if it had a ceiling, like a church, a cathedral,
Yeah.
but it didn't. And they said to me, space-time is contained within this, but we have way more things than just space and time, but we've got space and time as well, so hang on to that. And there was all these silver things, and there was like grids going through the space, like little super fine filaments, silver grids with information flashing up and down them, and you could plug into them. And I realised my own body, I saw it reflected in one of these silver rave blob mercury things, and I was one of them too. And they said, this is our world. This is, we're like dolphins. We move through this space. We make things. We play. There is no space and time here except as something you play with. This is way beyond space and time, but because our world's eternal, it's like it's always here. Nothing ever changes here except, you know. And I honestly, I can't explain how that works, but they said that to grow new members of our species, we make time, because only in time do things grow. Right?
Wow.
Right. So we make time, and so we make a universe, and we just pulled you out of one, and they showed me there was like a stall. It was like stalls, like incubators, like babies, but with universes in them. and they said, and that's your one, you know, and we put one of our larvae on a planet, and it consumes the planet. And I find this fascinating. It's like people have said, like people have said to me, like, well, this is actually, you're kind of endorsing the destruction of the environment, and I don't want to, but what they said to me was that if you look at a caterpillar on a leaf, it consumes its entire space in order to fuel a metamorphosis. So that's what you're doing. The planet is here. You are consuming everything on it. But there will come a moment where all of you realize you're all one simple organism, and the minute that happens, everything's going to light up, and then you become adult and leave the planet, and the planet will then recover. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's like
That's that's a lot to just bear on one person.
Yeah, and then it was kind of like, you know, and now you go back, and if you can try and explain any of this to the rest of the little microbes like you know, and it's like you're like a skin cell in a human body. You live and you die and you fall off, but the body persists and makes new ones just like you. So I go back. And I wake up with this, and it was so profound that I don't think the world that I was in was so much more real than this one. The fidelity of it, the you know, the sheer amount of pixels in their world compared to this one was like it was way more defined. And I've never been able to achieve anything like it. In the 90s, I took a lot of psychedelics and acid and to see if I could get to a place like that, and never, ever again could get anything that real. And so I was left with that, but out of it came things like the Invisibles, and a lot of my work has just been based on trying to articulate these ideas because they're so odd.
Yeah, and
but
so
they kind of make sense, you know. They got a weird sense to them, like
that's amazing.
This consumption is to fuel a metamorphosis from a maggot to a fly, from a larva to a butterfly.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like, I think that's just such a brilliant story there. And so with like, obviously you just touched on Invisibles there. Did much of that, like, you know, and much of your traveling and, you know, just your life, was a lot of that put into the Invisibles, including that brilliant experience? Was that all put into the Invisibles?
It was all over. The Invisibles was really very much like a diary, but it was a diary that I'm turning into a James Bond story, you know? I didn't go around shooting people or invading bases and killing people.
Well,
but
allegedly.
At the same time, Yeah, exactly. But the same time, the people I was meeting and the places I would go in, I would all put it in the invisibles and the kind of magic. I was doing a lot of crazy experiments, in the 90s, just testing the boundaries, and it went into that book, so it's all there.
Yeah. And so like the Invisibles, I imagine, was that just you throwing out everything, you had and putting in all these concepts that just seemed fun to you and just packing it all up into this book called The Invisibles?
Yeah, everything I was into, everything I loved, and also just all this new stuff that was happening as I was, traveling and doing new things and then trying new things. It all went into it, but it was like movies I liked, it was my friends are in there. There's like there's real experiences, there's made up experiences. But it like I say it to me, it's like a diary almost, the whole
Yeah.
time.
And so does that experience still affect your work? Like recently with Proctor Valley Road, like does your work, like you still find it as a writer, you're still looking back on all of your life and all of that big experience as well. And is that still coming in your work?
Yeah, I mean, not so much in Proctor Valley. That was mostly Alex Child's idea, and I'd always want to give Alex the kudos for that, because I just love the characters. He created that whole thing, but I love the
Yeah.
characters. So that's why I wrote the first issue. And I wanted to show him how to write comics, because he'd never written comics before. So they asked me if I could sort of demonstrate it. So I just took those characters for the first issue, and then I kind of helped him for the rest. But most of that's his.
Yeah.
But that's a kind of different worldview, but the same worldview is in most of my stuff. Yeah, the same idea that we're all one thing. We're just waiting to wake up to
Yeah.
recognise our similarity rather than our differences, which have been foregrounded a lot recently.
Yeah. And so say if you never left Scotland and you just spent your whole life in Scotland, do you think that as a writer you'd be very different?
Well, definitely,
Yeah.
so much of, to me, I have to travel, I have to see the world, I have to see the way other people think and act, and it is very different. You might think that, I've seen the idea that you should burrow into a place, and if you can understand one place, then you'll understand the world. But I don't know if that's true. I think you can understand one place, but also travel, and people are very different in other parts of the world. I remember going out when I first shaved my head, and I was in Indonesia, and every time I walked out the door, people would bring out their kids to laugh at me, and they'd like, and so yeah, it was just like, Shaolin. So
That can't have been fun.
But the great thing about traveling and getting around the world and experiencing things, and not you can burrow into your own culture and you can learn a lot from the people around you. But at the same time, to travel and to be outside your comfort zone and to find resources in yourself, because I would travel on my own. I didn't go with friends, so I was always having to adapt to new situations, and I think that made me a lot better as a writer. I was able to understand things from different perspectives. It wasn't always about me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how an experience like that can lead you to write a comic about, a hitman who has an imaginary, friend that's a blue, unicorn, which brings me to my next topic I want to touch on. Everyone, 'tis the season for it, isn't it? As you can all see, my Christmas tree is just there.
There you go. It's like
I told my parents, listen, I have a YouTube channel. We can't put it there. Believe it or not, just saying, I'm going to interview Grant Morrison. Didn't get me much street cred, believe it or not. I assumed it would, but I was very wrong. But happy. And so also adapting your work into film and TV show. Is that something you've been doing recently and maybe discussing some venues, maybe putting some of your work onto the big screen?
Yeah, I mean, and not so much. I mean, honestly, the stuff I've been doing this year is me adapting other people's work, which I
Oh,
love,
no way.
because I can get into someone else's head, And I'm doing a couple of shows, and there's one that we sold to Apple recently. So there's a couple of things.
Congratulations.
It's based on other people's work, but it's well-known books, but they're not genre things. They're not science fiction, but that to me, just getting into other people's heads and trying to see, like with Superman, trying to see what was the original impulse here, what was the idea, and how can I do that and recreate that. But my own stuff, no, I mean, Happy's the only one that could made.
Yeah, Happy's brilliant.
No, I love it. I think Happy the show is way better than Happy the comic. Happy the comic's okay, but the show I think is great because we have just actors doing that stuff, actors putting themselves through that. But no, Happy came from Simon Cowell, from watching Simon Cowell.
No way, really?
Because I thought back in the day when they had the original kind of like Pop Idol and all those things, or whatever the one he did. I forget what they're called now. But back in the day, remember he used to be so cruel to people. And I thought, this is what they do to working class people. They put them up on stage and they're dancing their heart out and they're singing their heart out. And then some rich guy goes, nah, you're rubbish, and breaks their hearts. And I thought, Happy's that little one thing, the little last spark. I'm all singing, I'm dancing, I'm going to dance, I'll dance my heart out for you. And Nick Sachs was the guy just, it's right.
Yeah,
it was my kind of revenge, is to just say, look, no, this is what you want us all to dance. You want us, you put us up on your TV, you make us dance like the monkey dance, and then tell us we're rubbish.
yeah.
And that's where it came from, was like just the anger about that. And I thought, I'll turn this into something, and I'll make the ultimate cynic and the ultimate little cartoon optimist and put them together.
Yeah, and so you were telling me at the start that you felt so bad for putting an evil Santa in Happy. You had to even it out by writing Klaus and doing it with Dan Morrison. Yeah. So was that? So you just felt like, okay, well, I did such an evil version of Santa. I have to even the scales out and do a very nice version of Santa.
No, I totally felt that, and I'd done a couple of really dark things like Nameless and Annihilator, and I just thought, I've got to do something a bit more upbeat. And basically, I wanted my own Superman, and then I thought, well, Santa Claus, nobody's done Santa as a superhero.
Yeah.
So that was it, and it's like then it's really easy. Once you get that notion, you just do Santa as a superhero, and it really works.
Yeah, and so I assume you had a lot of fun doing that, because it's just a bit cracked. Like you can kind of instead of doing you such a Nameless, fantastic book you do with Chris Burnham, probably one of the darkest comics of all time, or something like that. And so did you feel a bit of freedom?
Yeah, I wanted to wash the horror of Nameless off me. So it was the idea to here's the story, the origin story of Santa Claus the Barbarian, and it just seemed like such a nice thing to do by comparison.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you can do something like comics about good people and comics about bad people. And so one of the weirdest comics you've done that I absolutely love, and I know so many people, whenever I see on Twitter, underrated comic runs of all time, Doom Patrol comes up, your Doom Patrol. It's just your Doom Patrol, I think, is brilliant. And I know I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up, because no one would let me live it down in the comments if I didn't talk about Doom Patrol. But yeah, Doom Patrol, the world's weirdest characters. What was it like getting to work on them?
Well, it was one of these things that was thrown at me, and I thought, well, what can I do with this? And I loved the idea that they were weird. And at the same time, I was desperate to break away from that kind of the prevailing trend of Watchmen and Dark Knight, which was quite grim and realistic. And what would they really be like? They'd all have mental problems. And I thought, well, the Doom Patrol, they've already got mental problems. That's the great thing about it. And I just wanted to do something that emphasised the surrealism of superhero comics, because that's what I love the most. They can do things that you can't do on television or films. Even now, they're trying, they're getting there. But certainly back then, there was things you could do in comics you just couldn't do anywhere else. And I didn't want to explore the one more notion of what's it like to be a grim urban vigilante. So there was this idea of here's this bunch of freaks basically, but they do their best. They try to deal with problems that even normal superheroes can't handle, but at the heart of it, they're just messed up. And it was just kind of like, these were like people that I knew. These were friends, and in the art community who were all a bit broken, but made amazing art. They were all super cool. So I was kind of writing about people I know, and it was just like a great thing. It was a great venue to escape from the prevailing trend of realism in comics and go towards the surreal and the bizarre and the dreamlike, and so I loved it. I loved the characters. I was just so fond of them. They were easy to love.
Yeah, and exactly. I think it's like the first comic book with green pubic hair mentioned in it. So yeah, let's go. I mean, that's.
It's a problem we all have to deal with at one time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's just a comic book thing, Grant. I think that's just what comic book writers get. What's it? Yeah.
No, you're probably right.
It's all right. It's all just...
green tube. No, exactly. But it was also I was watching like Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer, and there was a lot just like mad, anything surreal, anything weird. I would just put it in. And it also allowed it to be funny and daft and kind of weird. It could be scary, but it could also be silly, which I liked. Kind of Monty Python, kind of weird.
And so, yeah, was there like a freedom attested there? Because maybe if you're writing Batman, everyone's going to be looking at it. But when it's Doom Patrol, you're like, well, they're just Doom Patrol, so you can have a bit of crack with it. So did you feel like you could just do whatever you want? Because, I mean, looking at that run, it seems like they just let you free to do whatever you want.
Well, they did. It was selling like 19,000 copies, and Paul Kupperberg, the writer, had been working on it. And no, and also Paul was so kind to me. I mean, he set things up for me, but he was trying to do it like X-Men, like a Chris Claremont X-Men, and it just wasn't working. And to me, it was like what we needed most was to move away from that model of the X-Men,
Yeah.
to do something much stranger. And the concept for me was like, you know, I've said before, like the X-Men is a school, the Fantastic Four is a family, the Avengers are a football team, the Justice League is the United Nations. So what was the Doom Patrol? And I thought, well, the Doom Patrol is a therapy group. It's people who get together to help one another.
Yeah.
And once I had that, then once you got that basic of what's this team, what is the team, what's the basis of this team, it's that. And saving the world became secondary almost. It's like we do this to help our self-esteem, but really the whole thing is about sitting in a circle and talking about the problems we have.
Yeah, see, that's the character work that I love. Is in like they're kind of like, I like looking at them as an unfunctional family. Like they're all kind of stuck together, and like none of them really work. Like they shouldn't really work, but as a group they do work, and like they do help each other. And I think that opens up a new side to them because they can see each other's problems, and then it makes them look at themselves and say, okay, well maybe that.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really love about your run. Like just team books is something you seem to do so brilliantly. And so, do you think like Doom Patrol prepared you for like Justice League and X-Men? Because of course that was the first team book you ever wrote, or because I mean I guess Doom Patrol was very out there. And for X-Men and Justice League, I'm sure you kind of had to stay inside the DC's radar.
They were all different ways of thinking, you know. Doom Patrol was, as I said, it was like, I'm going to write about outsiders as superheroes. And then Justice League came along and it's kind of, these are the greatest superheroes of all time. And I had to not write them as outsiders. I had to write them as like, they're the best there is at what they do. They're the greatest. It's Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. So that was a totally different way of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. There's my favorite story arc of yours, 1 million, part 1 and part 2. So it's a
but
fantastic...
the idea was that they were like the gods, they were like the pantheon. So I thought I could downplay personality but play up plot, you know, and play up the saga, play up the massive scale of the threats. And personality would be reduced to just really good little one-liners between them, so you could define a character in one line, you know, or in one action, like Superman. That electric Superman, where I actually gave him something to do.
Yeah.
So it was stuff like that, and like, you know, they really resisted Batman being in it.
Oh, really?
I had to argue. No, we can't have Batman. Batman's an urban legend. We're not going to have Batman on the moon. And I said, no, Batman has to represent. He's the human at the table of the gods, and please let me do this. But it was a big fight. They didn't even want to do it. They didn't think it would work to put all the greatest superheroes in one comic. They didn't think that would work. But it obviously worked out really well, and that took me into that level of, you know, you're doing DC Comics #1 book. Yeah. X-Men was different again. When I went to X-Men, it was just like, this is a soap opera. I'm going to do it like EastEnders. It's going to be like, you know, evil family members. It's going to be affairs and sex, and like that was what I came to that one with. Let's do a soap opera.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about your team books is how you see a lot of writers, they're known for doing team books. You're the first writer I've ever known that can do a bunch of team books, but they're all different. Like none of them feel the same. Like I don't look at X-Men and then look at Doom Patrol and say they're written by the same person. I'd say they're two different writers who have two different mindsets. And that's what I think. Of course, like you said, all your experiences, they give you all these different mindsets, which can really help for something like that. And I think that's just brilliant.
Different groups of people, you know, and like Seven Soldiers or something that's a team who never meets. The idea of Hope was a team who doesn't meet, but somehow they manage to affect, you know, the conclusion of the story. So I kind of always like to think of what's something I've not done. The authority was, what's it like when Dad gathers all the bad kids in the neighborhood and like, you know, we're going to do something. We're going to build a hut. Going to make you guys do something positive. And they're all very different dynamics, so it gives you an underpinning and an underlying structure that you can work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have to touch on this one page from Justice League. It's my favorite Justice League page of all time, especially from your one. It's the final page of this where Vandal Savage is, you know, he's ranting. And then just the final panel, I got goosebumps after reading it. It was, you know, the sky seems to catch fire as if struck by flint. Vandal Savage, the last caveman, experiences an overwhelming sense of deja vu. In the 853rd century, Mitch Shelley, the Resurrection Man, dies with a smile on his face. That was perfect. Oh, I was remember sitting there thinking, yes, that was just such a perfect way to end it. So I just have to commend you on that. I just have to shout that out there. Yeah, but that was brilliant.
Thank you.
And so yeah, like, and Justice League, X-Men, Doom Patrol, they're all like these different team books. And so is there one character or yeah, and speaking of team books, you were also in an issue of Suicide Squad. You haven't wrote. Have you heard about this? You're in an issue of the
No,
Suicide
I've seen it. But it's the idea that the character, the writer, suffers writer's block. Never, writer's block doesn't exist. Writer's block is just an excuse by writers who can't be asked working.
You were sitting there like, this would never happen to me. I would never let someone kill me.
I would always have that story. I've never had writer's block in my life. It doesn't exist.
I love how your problem
that's the one, but yeah, it was fun to be in there. I think I got torn apart by werewolves or something. You know?
I love how your problem isn't that, no, they included me in a book or they had my character die. So I wouldn't die by writer's block. That's brilliant. I love that.
That's what offends me most.
That's the thing you take from it. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so including yourself in a comic, this was something you did at the end of Animal Man. And so Animal Man is probably one of your most famous runs. We'll finish up soon. I just had to touch on this. Sorry. But Animal Man. Oh, no, brilliant. I had to you had so much things to touch on. But Animal Man. So this was one, like your first ongoing series. Would I be correct in saying so?
Yeah, that was the first one at DC, yeah.
Yeah, before that was Zenith from 2000 AD, which we touched on in a second. But yeah, so
yeah, that was my first like American monthly. So
yeah, absolutely. And so why Animal Man? Because as far as I know, you pitched it to them. So you had a meeting with DC and you chose Animal Man of all people. What was it about Animal Man that appealed to you?
I loved the character. I used to love all these obscure characters, and I remembered them from sort of backup stories and Strange Adventures, I think.
Yeah.
And I thought no one had touched it. But at the same time, what DC were trying to do was revitalize old characters. So I just thought, well, I've got one here that no one's noticed yet. And I thought what he tied into was the whole animal rights thing, you know. And at the time, I was a member of the Animal Liberation Front supporters group before they made it illegal. But so I was very much into that, you know, it was a thing. And I thought, well, here's something I can use in the same way that, say, Alan Moore used Swamp Thing to talk about the environment. I can use Animal Man to talk about animal rights and sort of contemporary issues that mean a lot to me. So that's what happened. And I came up with a 4-issue story, which was kind of basic. It was like almost, you know, again, it was like Swamp Thingy kind of, here's this character back from the dead and little story. And then they said, can you continue this into a regular story?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh no, I don't want to just do environmental problem of the month comics. I went back to that Flash comic I talked about, the Flash saying, you know, buy this comic, my life depends on it. And I thought, is there a way of doing adult, like kind of grown up, like smart superhero comics that doesn't involve sex and violence? Is there another way? Is there a more intellectual way?
Yeah.
So I got really into the idea of those 60s comics where it was like the Flash would talk to you, or there was a couple of comics where the Flash comes to Earth Prime, which was our world, and he would meet with Julius Schwartz, the editor, or he would meet with Elliot Maggin, the writer. And I thought, my God, there's something here about what are these characters actually? You know, they exist on the second dimension, they're flat, they exist, but they're meaningful, they affect us. Is there something in this idea of them meeting their creators that I can update and make, make sophisticated in some kind of way to counter the idea of just, let's make them real. What would it be like if he's real, or he's a pervert, he's a rapist? It's like, no, what would it be like for us to go to their world?
Yeah.
You know, what's it like there? And that was the big breakthrough for me. So that's what it became. It's like, I stopped wanting to make them like us, and I wanted me to be more like them, and to see how far that would take me as a writer. How far into their world could you get?
Yeah.
What would it do to you? You know, rather than bringing them in and it's like, oh, I've got a rip in my tights, or I've fallen out with my girlfriend. No, what's it like in their world where the sky's blue, or where there's, you know, where you can change 100 years in the turn of a page? What is the business there? What have we created? So that became, it was a big deal for me. I figured out what I wanted to do. And so in Animal Man, I introduced myself to the character, like, can I make an interface? Can I go in? Can I make a thing which I called eventually a fiction suit, where you can send yourself in to a fictional reality and interact with them?
Yeah. That's brilliant. And I love how you just go in and you just like, and it's such a perfect and poignant ending to a story, because, you know, you bring his family back, and like, he's like, can you bring my family back? No, you can't.
I can do that.
Yeah, it's
But
like,
I'm not going to be a bad god. I'm not going to be the bad. I'm going to give you the thing back. And that was the power I had. And I suddenly felt, wow, we have a responsibility to these fictional worlds. And that kind of influenced what I did next, you know, and a lot of my thinking then went into the Flex Mentallo comic, the spin-off from
yes.
Doom Patrol. And that was a lot of, this is what I'm thinking about. We owe a responsibility to our created worlds, you know.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And I think that's just it's one of my favorite comic book endings of all time because it just subverts everything and it brings this in. And it's like, it still works. It still fits so perfectly. Like, it just feels like
But
another
also,
story.
it's like the tragedy of it is like our God won't bring my little cat back. You know, that was the back in the day.
Yeah,
My cat died, and I was kind of saying, well, she's dead. I brought back Animal Man's family. Where are you, God? And like
yeah,
silence. You know? But then
exactly.
there's that little last light at the end, which is, you know, there's something out here, but it's maybe not what you think.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you can do a character like Animal Man, who I think some people just find ridiculous, and then write a story that actually has heart to it and it's personable. Like, and I think even you just brought up that Batcat moment from a while back. That's just one command with character that actually makes you go, oh wow. And so like these powerful moments with these little like funny characters, I think that's something that you do perfectly. I think that was
Yeah, I
brilliant.
think you know they're all ridiculous, but they're ridiculous and we love them. And I think sometimes you can that love can lead you into different emotions as well. It's we love the ridiculousness of these characters. So if they turn around and say, "Well, now you feel sad, don't you?" It really, really hits home.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's why I love your writing there. But yeah, Animal Man. So what in your opinion do you think is your work that like that's the Grant Morrison experience? What's that one work that's most personal to you that you think this is the Grant
I
Morrison
don't know.
book?
I mean, my favourite one is the Filth, which is the kind of weirdest one. But I think there's
Yes.
things like I would All Star Superman. People should read that. They should read Flex Mentallo. They should read if they want to get at the heart of it, you know. And then everything else comes off that. There are just some, you know, particular issues that I love, but I think definitely you have to read Flex and you have to read All Star Superman.
So what is it about the filth that makes it one of your favorite stories? What is it about that just you like?
It's exactly what I wanted it to be, and it was like I was confronting things that were annoying me. Like I knew that internet porn was going to cause problems in the future. I knew that
Yeah.
we were all going to get darker and more messed up, and it was kind of trying to turn that into poetry and confront it, you know.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it was. I mean, I was having the best time of my life when I was 40 when I wrote it. It was like the greatest time of my life. I didn't, but I wanted to write about a midlife crisis. I wanted to write about a 40-year-old man that I might have been if things had gone wrong. And so I kind of, I think it's really real. It's the emotions in it really strong, and I just love the mad ideas. I think it's one of the most inventive things I've done. You know,
Yeah.
and it has a particular message. You know, like this shit of the world, and it's just like, what do we do with this? Well, put it on your flowers. You know, and it's
Yeah.
such a, and that was like one of those things like the Superman with the girl, where it's just a phrase comes to your mind. It's like a big problem. Well, you're stronger than you think you are. Or what do we do with this shit? Well, spread it on your flowers. Fuck's sake, what do you think? You know, so
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
things like that, where it was like they were really just things that came to you genuinely through trying to work out certain emotions and ideas. And I love that book because it's so inventive and mad.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I love your work because there's just so much of your emotions and you can feel like even like something like the film that's personal to you. Something like Superman that feels just as personal, which a lot of
Yeah,
writers can kind of treat like as a job and like, but you treat it all personal, and you put a lot of yourself in every book you do, which I think is really fantastic. I think that comes
I
through very
think
nicely.
it's the only way to connect to people, though. You know, that's how you connect. Because if I feel a certain thing and it's honest, then the reader can read that and feel the same thing. Hopefully, you know, because it's for real.
Yeah, absolutely. And just while we touched on Superman, one thing I didn't get to bring up is that iconic image of him just sitting there on the clouds. And like
Yeah,
normally when we see Superman, he's like that, or he's like flying in the air, or he's like saving a bunch of cats, or stuff like that. So what was it about that image that you thought would be visually interesting? Because it's just Superman sitting there on the clouds, looking back at the camera.
yeah. It's just the idea of him watching over us, but in this really quiet kind of way. And as I said, a lot of the All Star Superman came from meeting the Superman cosplay guy in San Diego back in 1999 or whatever it was. And I was trying to think about Superman, how I would do Superman back then. And we went out into the dark, and me and Dan Raspler, the editor on Justice League, And there was this guy dressed as Superman, like really brilliant cosplay. He looked great. He looked like the real deal. And we ran up to him and I said, "Look, this is a shamanic moment for me. This is like, you've appeared just at the moment I need to talk to you." But basically, it all came from that. He came back and he sat down to talk to us, and there was this little kind of concrete bollard thing, and he sat on it, but he was super relaxed, and it was just the cape was kind of draping, and he'd one knee up.
Yeah,
I
wow.
thought, man, this is what broke it for me. I just thought, Superman, he's like invulnerable. Of course, he's not defensive, because you always see, like you say, it's like, muscle bound. But this is a guy who can't be hurt. Nothing can hurt him, so you'd actually be super relaxed. And the way this guy was sitting, I thought, wow, that is actually Superman. And he talked to us, he was honestly, he was seriously, he was sincere, and we'd say, "What do you feel about Lois?" And he'd go, "Oh, Lois doesn't understand my alien side." And he was totally acting in the part of Superman. So for me, it all came from that and the way he sat, and we wanted to recreate that in that cover. But it's funny, John Byrne saw it and he said, "That's not Superman, that's Peter Pan." So, but no, it is actually Superman. Sorry, John, but it was that sense of watching over us, just sitting in a cloud, just like not being the big poser, the muscle man, just being the watcher, the friend, up in the clouds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you just understand these characters fundamentally. And I think in all your works, you grasp an understanding of the character. So is that important for you when you're going on to a book? You try and like write out what you think this character is. Like Wonder Woman Earth One, which was some of it over here. You got to do a few stories with Wonder Woman. So do you just like try and just come up with a concept or a new take for that character and then say that's yours? Because like for Superman, you said, all right, Mike Superman is a kind Superman. And for your other stuff, so do you try and come up with a take when you're coming onto a new character?
I feel them. I feel them. It's like music to me. And my whole thing is like trying to create music. And again, it's why sometimes my books can be a little, I'll lose the plot logic sometimes,
Yeah.
But I want it to sound like something. I want it to make you feel a certain way. And I don't even have to understand these characters. I know them. I know that I knew Buddy Baker. I knew what music he liked. I knew he liked REM. I knew he liked to eat salsa and chips, and without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Superman, I know what he loves to listen to. I know what he likes to do. I know what he'd watch on television. The Wonder Woman, that. And it may not be. That's not necessarily the perfect, profound way. It's just my way. I feel as if I already know them, and all I have to do is copy down what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I love about
And
your
with
work.
Wonder Woman, I'm quite sad because people didn't really like those books, but that was my favourite thing that I've done in the last few years.
They're fantastic. I think they're brilliant.
Getting into a different way of working and thinking. There's a lot in there that hasn't really been, I don't think, noticed yet. But those were the ones, where I really, really loved those books. I'm so into those books. I did a lot of work in that. I spent a lot of time on it. But it was kind of like problematic.
No, I think it's still brilliant.
Well, no, it's cool. I'm interested to see how people look at them in the future, because I think they'll have a different perspective on them. But yeah, as I come back to your first question, I kind of feel as if I know them. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is that for all your characters? Is there ever a character that it's been hard for you to get into the head of, like Superman or anything like that, or do you just get them like immediately?
I've never had a problem with any
Oh
of them.
wow, really? Like
Even Lobo. I thought I would hate Lobo, but I loved writing Lobo when I did him at 52.
did you get to do Lobo?
Yeah, I did a great version of Lobo where he has to be non-violent. He's become the Pope of the church. And it's like he's desperate to just go nuts, but he can't. He's made a vow of peace.
Oh, that's the best version. I want to see it like an ongoing series of just Lobo who can't do any violence or anything like that. He just has to be happy. Yeah, that's perfect. So yeah, who is that?
You're going to build up to that ultimate moment where he loses it for half an hour.
And then like there's just 4 issues of him just beating the crap out of people. Like he just goes like it's just 4 issues of pure action scenes. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. And so who's that one dream comic book character you've yet to work on that you'd like to? Is there any for you? Or are you happy doing your own stuff?
No, I've done them all now. I'm not even doing a lot of comics just now. I felt I'd done them all, and I went through when I wrote the Super Gods book, and I really became evangelical about the possibilities of superheroes. But once I stopped, I don't feel the same way. I can't even read superhero comics now. I feel as if I've seen it all before, and I think that's just what happens to you if you live on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I'm so glad you're doing your own TV stuff now. You recently adapted Brave New World. And
Yeah.
so right now, are you writing scripts for TV? Has that been hard for you to kind of, is that an adjustment period? Because going from comic
Yeah,
scripts
it's been
to,
great. I mean, I loved it. I've learned from a lot of really great people, but I loved learning a new way of doing a story. You know, I really like writing dialogue and scenes. So it's been an interesting just escape from comics because I've been doing them so long and I've kind of got a method, and it's nice to shake yourself up a bit and learn new things. And I finished a novel as well, which is coming out next year. So that was a different way of working again, which was kind of
way.
fun.
So you're writing a novel. You've been writing novel screenplays and now, yeah, and
Yeah,
comics as well.
that was me in lockdown. I wrote a novel and two screenplays.
Where do you even find time to sleep? You know, I assume you just hang upside down in your cave. I assume that's how it works.
No, exactly. You're right. It's hang upside down my cave, or I get buried in my coffin.
And then because you go very method with it, like you feel like you have to break out now to know how Batman would feel. So I assume you really got buried alive just to know for Batman RIP. I assume that's how it worked.
No, what I did, I used to do a Batman workout though. I didn't get buried alive. I should have, but we've got an ice house just near the house, and there's the spiders in there, like Lord of the Rings style spiders. So if I'm looking for trouble, I can go down there and just sit there and try and stay. How long can I stay here and deal with
Oh.
it? This size, we took a DC editor down there once in the middle of the night, and he was just like, "Well, where am I?" It's like Mordor. It's like horrifying.
Sounds lovely. I assume that's the Manny Charms of Scotland. You just have a little spider. That's their house now. You don't even go down there. You just let them keep it.
It's
Like
not
there's
even a
no.
house. It's like a spider mansion. It's like these are like the royal spiders of hell.
They're the king of the spiders.
No, definitely king, queen, prince, and princess. It's monstrous spider.
Beautiful. And the very last comic we're going to touch on is Senate from 2080. I have to, I was giving to my good friend Paul Trimble. Everyone go check out Enniskillen Comic Fest and OMAC Comic Fest. But here's a memory of Carlos Esquera. But yeah, so Senate was your 2080 work. You know, was that some of your earliest work on 2080?
Well, no, I mean, I started when I was 17. I was doing stuff all the way, and Zenith was I was 26 when I got that gig, but that was the first time I was able to go off the dole. That was a big deal because I was finally able to, actually make money out of writing.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a big deal for me, and it was like, but I loved Zenith. Zenith was great fun. It was just like, here's what I'd be like as a superhero.
Yeah. And so did you kind of base them upon yourself? Because I know you were, of course, a musician as well, and so was Zenith, and like there's a lot of similarities between you. So was he based heavily upon yourself?
Well, I based them on the most unpleasant aspects of myself, really. I wanted them to be like just the thing about Zenith. If you read those stories now, you'll see that he's way smarter than he appears. There's moments where he's really obvious he's a superhuman and he just pretends to be Zenith. But I did want him to seem like the most shallow, the most like, especially after something like Watchmen, which was so deep and so meaningful and important and really well put together. I wanted Zenith to just seem like this. He didn't care. He was just this awful, shallow, like the most obvious boy band guy you could get. But there was way more to him. So it was fun to write that. To be that flippant and just disinterested in things.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's such a fantastic character. And he was the first superhero for 2000 AD. Would it be correct in saying so?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No, it was great because I wanted to write superhero stories, and that was the first thing they gave me. I wasn't a 2000 AD fan at all. I didn't read that comic. So I had to struggle to get to work in their voice and their idiom. And so when it became like, we want you to do a superhero story, that was such a relief because that's my patch, that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. So was Steve Mack your editor on that, Steve McManus?
He was, yeah, and then it was Richard Burton, and then it was Alan Kenzie. They swapped editors every few years, I think.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it's nice all that little schedule there. Yeah, absolutely. So another question, like, what are some comics that like inspire you? What's that comic from your childhood or something that you like think is, what's your like holy grail of comic books? Like, is it Watchmen or like what's that comic book do you enjoy?
No, it's those Flash things, those like super psychedelic Flash comics, and Jack Kirby's New Gods, and just those early Alan Moore things like Marvel Man and Captain Britain when he did that.
Here we go. But yeah, some of your Holy Grails comics you just touched on there, a few of those comics. Is there any comic in particular that you think like shaped you? What's that one comic? Was it that Flash that like just set off everything for you?
There was that Flash, but also the other one was Warlock, the Jim Starlin, 1974. It was like, no, it was not Warlock. It's Captain Marvel. It's Captain Marvel. And it's basically the one where Captain Marvel goes through this whole spiritual journey and becomes he gets the cosmic awareness and the whole deal. And I wasn't a Marvel fan at all. I didn't like Marvel comics. I thought they were kind of creepy and like there was too much stress in them. But this one, when I was 14, I was your age, and I picked up this comic, and it's like it's beautifully drawn. It's like amazingly constructed. But it's just Captain Marvel facing his own inner demons, and it's on this, far planet, and his dead girlfriend comes back. It's got everything, and that one just blew me away. It was the cosmic comics, when Jim Starlin was doing that, and Warlock came next. But that kind of like invigorated me in a way that it's like I was into comics, but the minute I read this thing, it's just like I want to do this. Because it was like just somebody putting their head on the page, and turning their thoughts into symbols and images, and I got it, and it was just that was the one I think was like most important for all of it.
Yeah, I'm actually very interested to hear that it's a Marvel comic. I didn't expect that. So, like, is X-Men the only work you've gotten to do for Marvel?
Well, I did that little Fantastic Four thing for them. I did Marvel Boy, which I liked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I did a couple of things, but honestly, I just wasn't. I don't have any connection to those characters at all.
Oh really? Were you always more of a DC guy growing up with Flash and Superman?
Always, yeah. Because as I said, I hated characters having problems. When I was a kid, it like drove me mad if they had problems. I wanted the superheroes just to come in and like solve the problems, because that's what they're for, So I didn't like Spider-Man. The stuff I did like about Spider-Man was the bits where he was sewing up his costume and having problems with Aunt May, but I hated the rest of it, and I didn't understand why the Marvel superheroes always fought each other. They always seemed to be fighting each other, and I hated that, because the DC ones would team up and save the world. So I was a kind of a simple child. I think I wanted stories just to be resolved. And it's weird because that kind of takes away the drama, I hate the stories with drama. I liked them just to come in and solve the problem. Here's the good guys, great. The baddies beat. But Marvel comics were all about, here's the obstacles, here's the stumbling block, here's what gets in his way, here's the problems. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I can't imagine you and Grant, and obviously now as a writer, like you obviously put a lot of trouble in your books. Like, I mean, the things you put Green Lantern through, which I won't bring up here because I'm very no, absolutely, yeah. But so, like, is it important for you to give your characters like problems, or in a way make them relatable? Because everyone has problems, and is that important for you? Or because I know a lot of people, instead of wanting their characters to be liked, they want their characters to be relatable, and like not even like you just want them to be understood. Like you know why they're doing it, what they're doing. Is that important for you? Like having them be relatable, or you just prefer if they were just understood?
I think. I don't know if they have to be like us, and I think a lot of what my work recently has been about is to think like people who are not like me, to think what's Hal Jordan like. He's not like me, but it's fun to put myself in his head and think how he would approach problems, or Wonder Woman, or any of these characters. So I feel as if it's more important to use these characters to expand your own potential, rather than less relatable and more, well, you might know a guy like that, it doesn't have to be like you. It might be there's always that friend who's like, he's super cool and he does all the great stuff, but inside he's got his own problems, so I think it's interesting to get into all the different variants of character. I don't think they necessarily have to be relatable in the sense that they've suffered in the same way that we have. They just have to be relatable in the sense that I recognize that person.
Yeah.
But that person, that person might be just the most wonderful man I've ever met, or the most wonderful woman I've ever encountered. If you can put that into a character, then it's like, oh, she's like my aunt, my brilliant aunt, and your aunt's got all these other sides to her, but the way you relate to her initially is kind of, oh, she's like Wonder Woman, or he's like Superman. I think we just have to make them recognizable rather than relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a perfect take. And so I'd also like to touch on like your own work. Is it you feel more of a connection working on We Tree your own stuff as opposed to Superman? Because these are your characters and they're fresh from you. And no, not at all. Do you feel that?
No, not at all. No. I mean, to me, it feels like the way I write, I'm always trying to write about what's going on in my head, you know. So it doesn't have to be a big thing like the death of my dad, which is in All-Star Superman, for instance. But it can be a small thing. It can be something I've read on the internet, something that makes me angry or sparks me off or gives me a thought or something I've seen on television. But every day I'm trying to put my own genuine feelings into the comics. So, you know, Superman, it's like Superman the Authority. I'm talking about NFTs in there because I've just read an article and I'm like, bringing the ultra humanites into this crap. And so everything comes from, it's like I say, it's like a diary, like The Invisible was a diary.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, how can I fit what I'm doing or what I've read or what I'm experiencing, what I feel, what am I angry about, what am I excited about, what am I happy about into a story. And that's more how it works, you know, and it can be, you know, which take me back to the start of the question because I've rambled off now, but
no, is there more of a connection? You put it perfectly there, but so is there more of a connection? So you just said, but yeah, so when it comes to something like
it's always the same. So no, that takes me basically to, so yeah, All-Star Superman, my dad dies. It doesn't go into The Invisible, it doesn't go into, that's done. It goes into All-Star Superman, that's the work I'm doing that day. So you get the scene where Clark Kent's at the funeral of his father, and he does that speech, and it was like me just thought, what's the perfect thing I could say about my dad, you know? And it's so that becomes kind of real because it's Clark Kent saying it about his, that's a fictional character saying it about a fictional dad, but it's all our dads, it's all the thing we most want to say at the end. And so that's as important to me as We Three, which is another. I'm sitting that day and it's like, run, bandit, run, and my eyes are streaming with tears. But it's just, as long as it's all real, as long as it's all relating to a feeling that you're having at the minute, I don't see the difference between any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just touching on, like, you know, We Three, which is a fantastic book, and like the death of characters and stuff like that. I want to ask you this: what's the most controversial decision you've ever made in a comic that people were not happy about? What's that one you remember just getting berated with? Is there any in particular?
Honestly, tons of Arkham Asylum. I was berated. I'm always getting berated. You know, Final Crisis. People hated it, and now they kind of really like it.
Yeah.
But when it came out, they hated Batman R.I.P. When it came out, they hated. It usually has to wait a little bit, and then people get it. You know, it kind of when it gets caught up in the just the kind of general hype and the month to month of comic books, it can often be criticized in ways that later people go back and go, no, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was. But yeah, I mean, honestly, there's always some problem with something, especially if you're doing people's characters that they love. You know, they hated X-Men, they hated if you do a character in a way that someone doesn't like, they will let you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, you just have such a great approach. And I think I always should know that no matter what people say, all your work is fantastic. It's pure brilliant. But yeah, so before we finish up, my last and final question: if anyone was looking to get into comic books as a writer, what advice would you have for them? Like, if anyone would look to be a writer, and everyone listen to this because this is from the legend himself. But what advice would you have?
Oh well, the trouble is things have changed quite a lot, and when I started out, there wasn't an internet at all. There wasn't that kind of network. But what we had was fanzines and this weird kind of old school, like pen and paper kind of attempt at network. So you would do your own thing. You would do a fanzine. You would create a thing. You know, you would just do your own work as an artist because you love it and because you can't help yourself. Which is what I did. I've got comics from when I was 14, 15. So they're never going to sell. They were shit. But I was doing them all along. I couldn't stop. I just wanted to make things. And like, so I think you need that drive. I think back then, what I would do is, make a fanzine, show it to a publisher. You go to who's the nearest one. Well, for me, it was DC Thompson. I tried to send stuff to DC Comics and Marvel, and they laughed at me. I remember sending this Conan the Barbarian, and honestly, the guy was emaciated. And they wrote back, and Marvel actually wrote back and said, "I think he needs a little nourishment." But So my heart was broken, but I would send stuff in. And in 1982, I sent a big thing called Second Coming to the DC New Talent Program. And I thought, well, here's this massive story about Green Lantern's lost his ring. It's like Lord of the Rings. He's got to throw the ring in this volcano on Mars, and Darkseid comes back. And I used a lot of it subsequently, but it has to be, I think you have to be making all the time for a start. It's not just, this isn't just a joke. You've got to want to do this. You have to be making it, even if no one's paying you. But then if you think the stuff you're making starts to be good enough to show to other people, and even if it's not, just do it anyway, and then you'll get, he looks a bit undernourished. But you've got to start showing your stuff, you know, and the more you can connect. I think now what you've got online, people can connect a lot more. You can meet artists, you can connect, you can maybe make things, but you've got to have something. You've got to prove that you can do this. You can prove you can do it every day. Well, you don't just have one project in your head. Like you can write 2 years worth of Batman comics, 7 years worth of Batman comics, and not stop coming up with material. So it's that you need to know that you can constantly produce, because this is like a commercial venture, you know. These are people who put out shit every month, and they expect you to be able to hit deadlines. It's not like writing poetry. It's not like writing novels. It's not. It's very demanding. So you have to be prepared to accept the demanding nature of it. You have to have so many ideas and so much you want to say that you can do that. And then you just send it to people, you know, and the better it gets, the better you've got to send. And you just keep going. It's like, I don't know, you could contact people, you know, speak to people like me, speak to people like Scott Snyder or anyone, and just say, look, I've done this, you know. And the tragedy is, in most cases, you look at it and go, oh, it's a bit, you know. But in some cases, this is brilliant. This is the new thing. So it's just knocking on doors, not being shy, like being proud of your work, getting it out there. And going straight to the people. And I think that's a lot easier now than probably it was when I was a kid. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's advice from Grant Morrison. So if you're wanting to get into comics, who better to listen to than the legend himself? But Grant, thank you so much for coming on. What a pleasure it's been chatting with you. I can't believe I got to do this. Everyone, before we finish up, Grant, are you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything like that?
No, I don't. My wife does these things and sometimes puts up pictures, but I honestly don't.
Is there a website or anything?
You can find some funny pictures.
Pictures of you sleeping, I assume. That's the such post. But yeah, so
it's all kinds of things. Me standing, me sleeping, me just lying down.
It's just a scrapbook of Grant doing everyday stuff, like him cooking. It's just, that's what we want to see. It's just you doing random stuff. You taking care of just stuff.
Looking after all these kittens I have to deal with every day.
And you, after your little spider empire, you obviously have out the back. I assume it's just there.
No, so I'm just looking after all the animals in the local region.
You are Animal Man. It's true. It's based upon you. But yeah, absolutely. And so, any new comics you'd like to promote or talk about, or anything people can go pick up?
I don't know. I've got nothing coming out. I'm not doing any comics right now, but I've got some plans. You know, there's things that will happen, but right now I'm just not doing. I just want to disappear seriously and do other things and not be noticed.
Yeah, exactly. It's the way to be.
Because everyone's doing me now. They're all doing my characters. It's great. Everything at DC seems to be based on something I wrote.
You must be loving it, yeah, with those big back cow royalties, I assume. But yeah, everyone, you can go pick up Proctor Valley Road as well, which is recent book, Superman and the Authority, and if then, like, of course, Green Lantern, and just any of Grant's work. But yeah, Grant, thank you so much for coming on. What a pleasure it's been talking to you. Everyone, you can go follow me over.
Thanks a lot. That was great.
No problem. I'll talk to you a little bit off air before I finish up here. But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for watching. You can follow me over on Twitter at SamboGizmo1. As always, during the Christmas season, if possible, please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children Society. There'll be a link down in the description. If you have the means, everyone, that'd be much appreciated. But if not, that's no problem. But yeah, every little cent helps. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. This has been my interview with the Grant Morrison. But yeah, stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.